The world of the Ice Age was a place where survival itself was an unending battle, and nowhere was a struggle more brutal than during the depths of winter. Imagine a vast landscape covered in endless snow, stretching from horizon to horizon. The air was so cold that each breath burned the lungs, and winds cut across the plains like invisible blades. The sun was often hidden behind heavy gray clouds, casting everything in a pale, dim light that barely distinguished day from night. For early humans, these were not brief seasons of hardship. They were long and merciless stretches of time that seemed to swallow entire lifetimes. Winter was not a backdrop, a relentless enemy that shaped every decision, every ritual, and every innovation. For the cavemen of prehistory, winter carried both a sense of awe and a constant threat. They were surrounded by forces far larger than themselves, massive glaciers crawling over the land, storms that could bury shelters overnight, and predators equally hungry and desperate. Unlike today, when humans can prepare with technology and heating, these people had nothing but their wits, their hands, and the fragile shelters they built from bones, stones, and hides. Every snowfall meant new risks. Every storm tested the endurance of their families and their ability to cling to life. The silence after a blizzard was not peaceful. It was heavy with fear, because within that silence lay the possibility of collapse, starvation, or death. This introduction to their world is not only about cold weather, but about a unique chapter in human resilience. To live through a prehistoric winter required more than finding food and firewood. It required a deep understanding of nature's rhythm. Cavemen had to anticipate when storms would strike, how snow would pile against their walls, and how ice would creep into the smallest cracks. They reinforced their shelters not as an occasional precaution, but as a ritual of survival. Each snowstorm carried the power to undo days of hard work. Roofs sagged under heavy drifts, walls cracked under the weight, and entrances froze shut. To ignore reinforcement meant inviting disaster. Thus, the winter was a cycle of building, breaking, and rebuilding, a constant dialogue between humans and the merciless environment around them. Yet, amid this bleak picture, there was also something profound. The flicker of firelight inside a reinforced shelter contrasted sharply with the blinding whiteness outside. Families huddled together. Children pressed close to their parents, and every heartbeat inside those shelters was an act of defiance against the cold. Winter was a season that stripped away all illusions, leaving only the essentials: warmth, food, shelter, and the will to continue. It was a time that tested not only the strength of bodies, but also the resilience of minds and the unity of tribes. Without cooperation, no individual could survive. Without preparation, no group could endure. As we begin this journey into the world of prehistoric winter survival, we step into a landscape where the stakes were as high as they could be. Life or death, warmth or freezing silence, survival or extinction. The cavemen of the Ice Age lived on the very edge of possibility, and their strategies, rituals, and sheer determination illuminate the roots of human endurance. In this opening glimpse, we see the eternal winter not just as an enemy, but as a sculptor, shaping the lives, beliefs, and innovations of our earliest ancestors. It was a season that demanded everything and, in return, gave humanity its first great lessons in resilience. The Ice Age was a landscape of extremes: frozen plains, rugged mountains, and shifting glaciers. For early humans, survival often meant moving, traveling, and adapting to new territories. Migration was not a casual choice. It was a strategic response to environmental changes, resource scarcity, and population pressures. The frozen world forced humans to navigate vast distances, confront unknown dangers, and make critical decisions that could determine the fate of entire communities. Each journey was a test of endurance, foresight, and cooperative planning. Seasonal shifts played a major role in driving migration. As temperatures dropped, game herds moved to more hospitable areas. Plants became scarce, and rivers or lakes froze over. Early humans, attuned to these patterns, followed the movement of prey and the availability of plant resources. Families and groups planned migrations with precision, carrying essential supplies such as tools, clothing, fire-starting materials, and preserved food. These journeys required logistical skill, memory, and knowledge of terrain, reflecting an advanced understanding of the environment. Traveling in groups offered both protection and efficiency. Humans moved together to reduce the risk of predator attacks, provide mutual support, and coordinate hunting and foraging along the way. Scouts and trackers often led the way, reading the land for signs of danger or opportunity. Shelter sites were chosen carefully, often near fresh water, natural barriers, or caves, to ensure temporary safety. Movement through the landscape was therefore not aimless wandering, but a series of deliberate, carefully calculated steps designed to maximize survival. Migration was fraught with danger. Frozen rivers, blizzards, deep snow, and treacherous terrain posed constant threats. Predators followed similar patterns, creating additional risk. Humans had to balance speed with caution, avoid fatigue, and maintain group cohesion over long distances. Injuries, illness, or the loss of key resources could jeopardize the entire migration. Success depended on planning, skill, and the ability to respond quickly to unforeseen challenges, highlighting the resilience and adaptability of early humans. Territorial challenges also shaped human movement. Groups competed for hunting grounds, shelter sites, and access to scarce resources. Encounters with other human groups could result in cooperation, trade, or conflict. Negotiating these territorial dynamics required social intelligence, communication skills, and sometimes displays of strength or strategy. The ability to understand and navigate both the natural and social landscapes was critical for survival, reinforcing the interconnectedness of environment, society, and strategy. Tools and technology were crucial during migration. Portable shelters, insulated clothing, and fire-starting equipment allowed humans to endure long journeys in extreme conditions. Knowledge of landmarks, navigation techniques, and survival strategies was passed orally from one generation to the next, forming a cultural memory that guided future migrations. These journeys were not only about physical movement, but also the transmission of knowledge, skills, and social cohesion, ensuring the survival of both people and culture. Migration also demanded resource management. Food, water, and fuel had to be rationed carefully. Groups relied on preserved food, hunted game along the way, and supplemented their diet with gathered plants when possible. Strategic stops at favorable sites allowed for rest, shelter reinforcement, and observation of the surrounding environment. This careful planning transformed migration from a desperate flight into an organized, purposeful activity, a complex interplay of strategy, endurance, and foresight. The psychological dimension of migration was significant. Moving through harsh, unfamiliar terrain was inherently stressful, but group support rituals and shared experiences mitigated fear. Songs, storytelling, and social bonding reinforced morale, provided guidance, and maintained cohesion. The journey became a shared narrative, weaving together survival, culture, and human ingenuity. Fear of the unknown was counterbalanced by the knowledge, experience, and cooperation of the group, demonstrating how psychological resilience was as essential as physical endurance. Migration was not only a response to environmental pressures, but a driver of innovation. New territories exposed humans to unfamiliar plants, animals, and landscapes, prompting experimentation with tools, hunting techniques, and shelters. Challenges encountered along the way fostered problem-solving and adaptability, traits that became hallmarks of human evolution. Each journey expanded the boundaries of knowledge, territory, and survival skill, allowing humans to thrive in regions that might otherwise have been uninhabitable. Ultimately, the migrations of Ice Age humans were a testament to resilience, intelligence, and cooperation. Each journey involved calculated risks, careful planning, and social cohesion. By following the rhythm of nature, respecting territorial boundaries, and leveraging collective skill, humans navigated frozen landscapes, secured resources, and ensured the continuity of their communities. Migration exemplifies the intersection of survival, ingenuity, and social organization, a story of courage, endurance, and adaptation in one of the most challenging periods of human history. The human body is a remarkable creation, capable of adapting to many environments, but when faced with the full power of Ice Age winters, its weaknesses became painfully clear. Unlike the thick-coated animals that roamed the tundras, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and wolves, humans had no natural defenses against the cold. Their skin was thin, their hair sparse, and their bodies quickly lost heat in freezing winds. Without shelter, clothing, and fire, exposure to the elements meant death in mere hours. The cold did not discriminate. It attacked the strong and the weak alike, making every storm a potential executioner. Frostbite was one of the silent killers of the prehistoric winter. Fingers, toes, and noses were first to succumb, turning black and useless if exposed for too long. A single lost limb could cripple a hunter and leave an entire family vulnerable. Hypothermia was an even deadlier threat. As body temperatures dropped, energy drained away, thoughts became sluggish, and the will to survive faded into a dangerous sleep. In many ways, winter fought not only against the body but also against the mind. To survive the cold was not only about resisting numbness in the flesh, but also resisting despair in the spirit. The predators of the Ice Age only highlighted human fragility. Wolves with thick fur packs could run across frozen plains with ease, while cave lions crouched silently in the snow, blending perfectly with the pale landscape. Bears, emerging from their dens, carried with them both strength and insulation that humans lacked. For cavemen, stepping outside a shelter in midwinter meant confronting both the merciless cold and predators built for that very environment. The contrast could not have been sharper. Nature had prepared its beasts for the cold, but it left humans to depend on tools, fire, and fragile cooperation. Food scarcity deepened this vulnerability. In summer, a successful hunt could provide a tribe with enough meat to dry and store, enough fat to last weeks. In winter, prey often migrated or grew lean, offering little nourishment. When snowstorms buried the land, hunters faced a choice of risking their lives for uncertain game or staying inside to starve. Hunger gnawed as fiercely as frost, turning survival into a battle on two fronts. The weakened body, stripped of fat and warmth, became even more susceptible to the freezing air. Hunger and cold together created a vicious cycle, one feeding the other until only the strongest strategies or the luckiest opportunities could break it. Even within reinforced shelters, survival was not guaranteed. Smoke from fires could suffocate those inside if ventilation was poorly managed. Firewood gathered during autumn could run out before the thaw, forcing groups to burn bones, leather, or even parts of their own shelters. Every resource mattered, and every mistake carried consequences. The fragility of life was a daily reality. Death could come from the storm outside or the cracks within the walls. The balance between protection and exposure was razor-thin. Yet this vulnerability, harsh as it was, also drove humans toward innovation. Unlike animals that relied solely on their bodies, cavemen learned to compensate for their weaknesses. They stitched furs together into clothing. They reinforced shelters against snow, and they kept embers alive through the night to avoid rebuilding fires from scratch. Their very fragility forced them to develop intelligence, creativity, and cooperation far beyond what survival demanded of other species. It was precisely because humans were weak in the cold that they became strong in strategy. The contrast between human vulnerability and ingenuity is what makes the Ice Age stories so powerful. On one side stood nature's crushing might, the cold, the predators, the hunger, the endless storms. On the other side stood small bands of fragile people, armed with little more than their determination and resourcefulness. Vulnerability was their curse, but also their teacher. Every frostbitten hand, every collapsed shelter, every near starvation was a lesson carved into memory and passed down to future generations. By understanding just how exposed and fragile early humans were in this frozen world, we gain a clearer sense of why winter demanded constant vigilance. It explains why they reinforced shelters after every snowstorm, why fire was never allowed to die, and why food stores were guarded so fiercely. In their weaknesses lay the seeds of survival. Prehistoric winter was not only a battle of body against cold, but a battle of human vulnerability against the immensity of nature itself. When the first heavy flakes of snow began to fall from the gray ice age skies, it was not simply weather, it was a warning. Cavemen understood that a storm meant more than just cold. It meant the testing of every wall, every roof, and every entrance of the shelters they depended on. A snowstorm was like a living force that pressed down on them, burying, cracking, and suffocating anything that was not built to endure. It was for this reason that, after every storm, no matter how exhausted or cold they were, early humans immediately set to work reinforcing their shelters. They knew from experience that survival was not guaranteed. Even after they had endured the storm itself, the true danger often came afterward, in the form of collapsing walls, weakened roofs, or entrances blocked by tons of snow. Snow carried a deceptive weight. What began as light, fluttering flakes could pile into heavy drifts that crushed mammoth bone frames or cave in animal hide coverings. Even strong caves have become hazardous as snow and ice piled at their mouths, blocking air and escape routes. For a family huddled inside, the danger was not always outside predators, but the simple weight of nature pressing relentlessly down upon them. Reinforcement became a ritual of survival, digging out, bracing walls, clearing roofs, and sealing cracks against the icy wind. Without this routine, even the strongest shelters could become tombs. The process of reinforcing shelters was born out of both necessity and bitter experience. Imagine a group that had worked for weeks to build a sturdy bone-and-hide dwelling, only to wake after storm to find the structure sagging inward. One sharp crack, one collapse in the night, and the fire inside would be smothered, children buried, and the tribe left exposed in the freezing dark. Such tragedies taught painful lessons, passed down through stories and rituals, ensuring that no storm was ever taken lightly. Reinforcement was not laziness delayed until spring. It was an urgent act immediately after the sky cleared. The first task after a storm was not celebration for having survived, but work to make sure survival could continue. This cycle created a rhythm of winter life. Storms would sweep across the plains, howling and covering everything in deep layers of snow. As soon as they ended, groups emerged, weary and shivering, to begin their work. They brushed snow from roofs, added new supports to sagging beams, and rebuilt walls with fresh hides or branches. Entrances were dug out, pathways cleared, and fires fed with new fuel to dry out damp spaces. It was labor done with frozen fingers and stiff muscles, but it was the only way to reset the balance before the next storm came. In many regions, storms followed each other closely, leaving little time to rest. Each reinforcement was a race against time, a race against the next wave of nature's fury. Reinforcing shelters also reflected the intelligence and adaptability of early humans. They observed how snow accumulated, where drifts pressed hardest, and how weight distributed across frames. Over generations, they learned to adjust designs, sloping roofs so snow would slide off, layering hides for insulation, using bone or stone as anchors against the wind. Each reinforcement added small improvements, turning primitive shelters into evolving works of survival engineering. These were not permanent homes, but they were tested again and again until only the strongest methods remained. What looked like simple huts to outsiders were, in fact, the result of centuries of trial, error, and adaptation in the harshest conditions imaginable. The contrast here is powerful. On one hand, fragile shelters built from perishable materials. On the other hand, the crushing, relentless storms of the Ice Age. The shelters were never meant to be indestructible. They were meant to be reparable. Cavemen did not expect to build once and live in safety. They expected to fight nature storm by storm, reinforcing again and again, because permanence was a luxury the Ice Age never allowed. Every repaired wall was an act of defiance. Every dugout entrance a refusal to surrender. Survival was not about winning against nature, but enduring through persistence. Inside these reinforced shelters, the rewards were immense. Once the cracks were sealed, the fires stoked and the roofs braced, the shelter transformed from a fragile hut into a fortress of warmth and life. Outside was endless cold, silence, and predators. Inside was firelight, the smell of cooked meat, and the closeness of family. The act of reinforcing was more than just labor. It was a psychological victory. It told the group that they were safe again, that they could sleep without fear of the roof collapsing, that they could tell stories in peace while the storm raged outside. Each act of reinforcement bought them another day, another night, another chance to continue the fragile miracle of life. By looking at this cycle of snowstorms and reinforcement, we see why it became one of the most defining survival habits of early humans. It was not a small detail of life. It was a heartbeat of winter existence. Reinforcing shelters after every snowstorm was a dividing line between those who endured and those who were lost to the cold. It was a ritual shaped by tragedy, refined by necessity, and practiced with unwavering discipline. In the eternal winter of the Ice Age, survival depended not on waiting for storms to pass, but on rising to rebuild in their aftermath. This resilience, born in snow and firelight, carried forward into the DNA of humanity, teaching that survival is never a single victory, but continuous battle against the elements. When we think of prehistoric life, we often imagine caves filled with smoke and families huddled together around fires. While caves were indeed used whenever available, the truth is that early humans could not always depend on them. Caves were limited in number, often already occupied by predators like bears or lions, and sometimes too damp or unstable to provide reliable protection. As a result, cavemen had to become masters of improvisation, building shelters with whatever materials the environment offered. This was not just a skill. It was an art form born of necessity, refined through generations of trial and error, and perfected in the relentless classroom of winter survival. Shelter building was a direct answer to the vulnerabilities of the human body. Without fur, claws, or natural insulation, humans needed barriers between themselves and the elements. A well-built shelter was more than just a roof. It was a living shield against the merciless winds, a buffer against predators, and a womb-like space where warmth could be nurtured. The difference between a poorly built shelter and a well-constructed one was often the difference between life and death. A flimsy structure could collapse under snow, suffocate its inhabitants with smoke, or leave cracks that allowed cold air to seep in. A strong shelter, carefully planned and regularly reinforced, became a fortress in the wilderness, a symbol of human ingenuity standing firm against the elements. Different environments inspired different designs. In mammoth steppe regions of Eurasia, humans famously built mammoth bone huts. These remarkable structures were constructed by arranging massive bones in circular patterns, then covering them with hides to form insulated domes. Skulls and tusks acted as supports, while fur and grass provided added insulation. In forested regions, shelters leaned on timber and branches, lashed together with sinew, and layered with leaves, moss, or hides for warmth. Where snow was abundant, temporary snow shelters were carved, primitive predecessors to igloos, where packed snow acted as an insulating barrier against the very cold it embodied. Each design reflected a deep awareness of environment, material, and necessity. Shelter building also revealed a sense of engineering that went beyond instinct. Sloping roofs were angled to prevent snow from piling too heavily, while rounded shapes resisted wind pressure more effectively than flat walls. Entrances were sometimes built low to the ground and angled, trapping warm air inside and preventing icy gusts from sweeping through. Fire pits were carefully placed to reduce smoke buildup, while maximizing heat distribution. Over time, small improvements became inherited knowledge, passed down through demonstration and practice. What might look crude to us was, for its time, a sophisticated response to environmental pressures, rivaling in importance any tool or weapon of the era. But building shelters was never a one-time effort. Each winter demanded vigilance. A shelter had to be checked constantly, walls patched with new hides, roofs braced with extra branches. But building shelters was never a one-time effort. Each winter demanded vigilance. A shelter had to be checked constantly, walls patched with new hides, roofs braced with extra branches, snow cleared before its weight grew too heavy. Reinforcement after storms was not mere repair work, but part of the shelter's life cycle. In this way, shelters became dynamic spaces, continuously adapted as conditions changed. A group might begin winter with one structure, but by the end of the season, that same shelter would bear the marks of dozens of storms, countless repairs, and layer upon layer of human effort. Shelters were not only physical constructs, but also cultural ones. They represented the cooperative spirit of the tribe. No single individual could gather all the bones, skins, and would require to build an enduring home. Men, women, and even children worked together, each contributing to the construction process. The act of building bound the group together, teaching younger members the techniques that ensured survival. Within those walls, families told stories, painted images, and practiced rituals. The shelter became a microcosm of human society, a place of protection, warmth, and meaning in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. The contrast between strong and weak shelters tells us much about survival. Those who mastered the art of building could endure storm after storm, year after year, passing on their knowledge and expanding their bloodlines. Those who failed, who underestimated the weight of snow or the bite of wind, often vanished into history, their shelters collapsing and their stories silenced. In this way, the environment itself became an unforgiving teacher, rewarding ingenuity and punishing neglect. It is important to recognize how much these shelters shaped the rhythm of Ice Age life. They were not grand monuments, but they were symbols of resistance. In a world where the cold seemed endless, shelters stood as defiant creations, fragile yet enduring, temporary yet essential. They were born from the bones of animals, the branches of trees, the hides of prey, and the labor of many hands. Reinforced storm by storm, they held within them not only fire and bodies, but also the fragile flame of hope. The art of shelter building, then, was not just about architecture. It was about survival, community, and the triumph of human adaptability. Each structure, no matter how small, told a story of resilience. It whispered of ancestors who, faced with the crushing weight of snow and the freezing breath of winter winds, refused to surrender. Snow cleared before its weight grew too heavy. Reinforcement after storms was not merely repair work, but part of the shelter's life cycle. In this way, shelters became dynamic spaces, continuously adapted as conditions changed. A group might begin winter with one structure, but by the end of the season, that same shelter would bear the marks of dozens of storms, countless repairs, and layer upon layer of human effort. Shelters were not only physical constructs, but also cultural ones. They represented the cooperative spirit of the tribe. No single individual could gather all the bones, skins, and would require to build an enduring home. Men, women, and even children worked together, each contributing to construction process. The act of building bound the group together, teaching younger members the techniques that ensured survival. Within those walls, families told stories, painted images, and practiced rituals. The shelter became a microcosm of human society, a place of protection, warmth, and meaning in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. The contrast between strong and weak shelters tells us much about survival. Those who mastered the art of building could endure storm after storm, year after year, passing on their knowledge and expanding their bloodlines. Those who failed, who underestimated the weight of snow or the bite of wind, often vanished into history, their shelters collapsing and their stories silenced. In this way, the environment itself became an unforgiving teacher, rewarding ingenuity and punishing neglect. It is important to recognize how much these shelters shaped the rhythm of Ice Age life. They were not grand monuments, but they were symbols of resistance. In a world where the cold seemed endless, shelters stood as defiant creations, fragile yet enduring, temporary yet essential. They were born from the bones of animals, the branches of trees, the hides of prey, and the labor of many hands. Reinforced storm by storm, they held within them not only fire and bodies, but also the fragile flame of hope. The art of shelter building, then, was not just about architecture. It was about survival, community, and the triumph of human adaptability. Each structure, no matter how small, told a story of resilience. It whispered of ancestors who, faced with the crushing weight of snow and the freezing breath of winter winds, refused to surrender. In those shelters, humanity learned one of its most important lessons, that even against overwhelming odds, resourcefulness and cooperation could carve out spaces of safety in a hostile world. Fire was the lifeblood of Ice Age survival. For early humans, it was far more than a tool. It was warmth, protection, a cooking source, and a symbol of control in a world dominated by cold and danger. In a landscape of endless snow and bone-chilling winds, fire transformed fragile shelters into havens of life. The flickering flames pushed back darkness, kept predators at bay, and allowed families to huddle together, sharing stories and strategies. Without fire, even the most reinforced shelter will be little more than a frozen coffin. With it, life could continue, hope could endure, and survival became possible. Learning to create and maintain fire was a monumental achievement. Early humans could not rely on the matches or lighters we take for granted. They had to spark flames using friction between wood, striking stones together, or harnessing flammable materials like dry moss and resin. Every ember was precious, for losing it could mean the end of warmth for days or weeks. Once fire was lit, the challenge shifted to preservation. Embers had to be carefully maintained through the night, shielded from snow and wind, and coaxed into life again at the first sign of darkness. This constant attention created a rhythm of life intertwined with the movement of the sun and the shifting of storms. Fire was also essential for cooking and food preservation. Raw meat could be dangerous to consume, and cooked meat provided not only calories but warmth, nutrition, and energy essential for enduring winter. Smoke from cooking fires served a dual purpose. It preserved food by drying it or reducing spoilage and acted as a subtle signal to other tribe members, marking safe areas or alerting groups to danger. In the icy wilderness, fire became both a necessity and a language, communicating survival through its presence. The psychological effects of fire cannot be overstated. In the freezing darkness of an Ice Age night, flames offered a sense of security that went beyond warmth. The glow illuminated faces revealed allies and created a center around which social bonds could form. Families and tribes gathered, sharing knowledge, telling stories of past hunts, and reinforcing social cohesion. Firelight provided a refuge from isolation and fear, a tangible proof that humans could shape their environment rather than merely submit to it. In this sense, fire was not just physical. It was deeply cultural, forging early traditions and rituals that would persist for generations. Fire also provided protection against predators. Wolves, bears, and other large carnivores feared flames, and even the most persistent predators would usually avoid areas with smoke and light. This allowed early humans a margin of safety, a buffer between themselves and the dangers of the Ice Age. When combined with reinforced shelters, fire created an environment that amplified the effectiveness of every defensive measure. The warmth kept bodies functional. The light kept fear at bay, and the presence of flames deterred those who would otherwise threaten life within the walls. The interplay between fire and shelters demonstrates the interdependence of survival strategies. A shelter without fire offered little warmth. Fire without a shelter was vulnerable to wind and snow. Together, they formed a synergistic system of protection. This interdependence also reflects the intelligence and foresight of early humans. They understood that survival was not about isolated solutions, but about combining tools, knowledge, and effort to create a livable space within a hostile world. Each fire stoked in a freshly reinforced shelter was an affirmation of human ingenuity and determination. Fire also encouraged innovation. Techniques for keeping flames alive through storms, storing embers, and even transporting fire between locations led to advances that would carry forward into future generations. Simple strategies, burying embers in ash, covering fires with insulating materials, or using dry moss as tinder, made survival more reliable and created the foundations for increasingly sophisticated uses of heat and light. Fire was no longer just a tool. It became a principle of survival, a constant companion that humans learned to control and respect. Finally, fire symbolized hope and continuity. Each night, when flames flickered in a reinforced shelter, the family inside was not just surviving. They were asserting their existence against a vast, indifferent wilderness. The smoke rising from a distant cave was a sign of life persisting in a frozen world, a testament to the resilience, resourcefulness, and cooperation of early humans. Fire was the heart of winter survival, a living force that transformed cold, darkness, and fear into warmth, community, and endurance. Without it, the story of human survival in the Ice Age would be far shorter and far more tragic. Winter transformed the landscape into a perilous arena where hunger stalked every human just as surely as predators did. During the Ice Age, food scarcity was not a seasonal inconvenience. It was a constant threat to survival. In summer, cavemen could rely on abundant game, berries, roots, and small animals, but winter stripped the land bare. Rivers froze, plants vanished beneath thick snow, and herds of prey either migrated or became harder to track. Survival depended on knowledge, foresight, and the ability to extract every possible calorie from a harsh environment. The struggle for nourishment was as relentless as the cold, and it shaped not only their daily routines but the very architecture of life inside reinforced shelters. Hunting during winter was particularly challenging. Predators were not only competitors, but also teachers in stealth and strategy. Wolves and other carnivores adapted easily to snow and ice, while humans had to improvise. Tracking animals across frozen plains demanded patience, skill, and an intimate understanding of animal behavior. Hunters learned to read the signs in the snow, footprints, broken branches, and subtle changes in vegetation, deciphering the landscape for opportunities. Even a successful hunt was only half the battle. Once captured, animals had to be processed quickly to prevent meat from freezing too solid or being lost to scavengers. Preservation was equally vital. Early humans developed methods to store and extend the life of their food, anticipating long months without fresh supplies. Meat was dried, smoked over fire, or stored in cold, insulated spaces within shelters to slow spoilage. Bones were cracked for marrow, which provided rich, concentrated nutrition. Fat, highly valued for energy and warmth, was extracted and saved for crucial days. Every part of a hunted animal was used, leaving nothing to waste. This meticulous preparation was not luxury, it was necessity. A miscalculation could mean starvation, and a failed hunt could bring dire consequences to the entire group. Foraging supplemented hunting, even in winter's dead landscape. Inside the shelter, food became more than sustenance. It was central to the rhythm of daily life. Meals were shared communally around the fire, providing warmth, comfort, and social cohesion. Eating together reinforced bonds, allowed for the exchange of survival knowledge, and became a psychological buffer against the isolation and terror of the cold outside. Hunger, fear, and fatigue could be tempered by these rituals, reminding humans that cooperation and shared effort were as critical as physical nourishment. The scarcity of food also heightened the stakes of winter survival. Starvation could quickly weaken the body, making hypothermia and frostbite more lethal. It forced early humans to weigh risks carefully. Should they venture out in a blizzard for uncertain prey, or ration the stores in their shelter? These decisions were matters of life and death, and they shaped behaviors, social hierarchies, and migration patterns. Tribes with superior hunting skills, foresight, and food store strategies were more likely to endure. Those who failed were often lost to the elements. The contrast between abundance and scarcity created an intimate connection to the environment. Cavemen had to respect the land and its creatures, understanding that failure to plan or adapt could lead to extinction. The frozen world demanded skill, strategy, and innovation in equal measure. It was a world in which every meal was earned, every morsel conserved, and every storm a reminder that survival depended on both immediate action and long-term preparation. Ultimately, winter survival was not just about staying warm, but about sustaining life through scarcity. Food, carefully hunted, preserved, and shared, became the lifeline that allowed humans to endure the long, brutal months. It tied directly to the importance of reinforced shelters, fire, and cooperation. Without these intertwined strategies, survival would have been impossible, and the story of human resilience in the Ice Age would have ended in silence and snow. Nuts, seeds, and the roots of hardy plants were carefully collected, often buried or cached during warmer months for later retrieval. Ice and snow posed challenges, but also opportunities. Frozen fish could be stored without spoiling, and certain roots and tubers remained edible under the snow if located carefully. Early humans developed an intricate knowledge of the land, tracking not just animals but seasonal growth cycles to maximize food security. Survival was a continuous calculation, balancing risk, reward, and resource management. Inside the shelter, food became more than sustenance. It was central to the rhythm of daily life. Meals were shared communally around the fire, providing warmth, comfort, and social cohesion. Eating together reinforced bonds, allowed for the exchange of survival knowledge, and became a psychological buffer against the isolation and terror of the cold outside. Hunger, fear, and fatigue could be tempered by these rituals, reminding humans that cooperation and shared effort were as critical as physical nourishment. The scarcity of food also heightened the stakes of winter survival. Starvation could quickly weaken the body, making hypothermia and frostbite more lethal. It forced early humans to weigh risks carefully. Should they venture out in a blizzard for uncertain prey, or ration the stores in their shelter? These decisions were matters of life and death, and they shaped behaviors, social hierarchies, and migration patterns. Tribes with superior hunting skills, foresight, and food storage strategies were more likely to endure. Those who failed were often lost to the elements. The contrast between abundance and scarcity created an intimate connection to the environment. Cavemen had to respect the land and its creatures, understanding that failure to plan or adapt could lead to extinction. The frozen world demanded skill, strategy, and innovation in equal measure. It was a world in which every meal was earned, every morsel conserved, and every storm a reminder that survival depended on both immediate action and long-term preparation. Ultimately, winter survival was not just about staying warm, but about sustaining life through scarcity. Food, carefully hunted, preserved, and shared, became the lifeline that allowed humans to endure the long, brutal months. It tied directly to the importance of reinforced shelters, fire, and cooperation. Without these intertwined strategies, survival would have been impossible, and the story of human resilience in the Ice Age would have ended in silence and snow. In the frozen world of the Ice Age, survival hinged not only on warmth, food, and shelter, but also on the clever use of tools. Early humans were physically weaker than many of the animals they hunted and far more vulnerable to the elements, yet they possessed a remarkable ability to shape their environment through ingenuity. Tools extended their reach, enhanced their strength, and allowed them to manipulate materials that would otherwise be useless. From simple stone scrapers to intricately crafted bone spears, every tool was a lifeline, a key to endurance, and a testament to human adaptability in a harsh, unforgiving world. Stone tools were among the earliest and most essential implements. Sharp-edged flakes and hand axes made hunting and butchering more efficient, allowing humans to process meat quickly before it spoiled or was stolen by scavengers. Stone points were carefully fashioned to pierce the hides of large animals like mammoths, reindeer, and bison. Scrapers removed fur and prepared hides for clothing or shelter reinforcement, while larger stones were used for crushing bones to extract marrow, a calorie-dense resource crucial for surviving winter. The precision and effectiveness of these tools often meant the difference between a successful hunt and starvation. Bone and antler tools complemented stone implements in remarkable ways. Cavemen shaped bones into needles for sewing hides, awls for punching holes in thick leather, and spear tips for hunting. Antlers could be carved into digging sticks, helping to extract roots and tubers even under frozen soil. These tools were lightweight, durable, and incredibly versatile, proving that survival relied as much on creativity as on brute strength. By combining stone and bone, early humans transformed raw materials from their environment into sophisticated technologies tailored to specific needs. Wooden tools, while less likely to survive for millennia, were equally vital. Sturdy branches became digging sticks, fire pokers, and supports for shelters. Wooden shafts carried stone or bone tips, creating spears that could reach farther than human arms alone. Even simple logs could be fashioned into sledges or rollers to move heavy objects, like large bones or supplies, across snow-covered plains. The use of wood highlights an important aspect of Ice Age survival. Humans understood how to combine different materials for maximum effect, creating composite tools that multiplied their efficiency. Tool use extended beyond hunting and construction into daily life inside the shelter. Stones and bones were used to grind pigments for cave paintings, sharpen wooden stakes, or maintain fire. Needles and sinew allowed for tailored clothing and insulated sleeping areas, while improvised hammers, anvils, and levers aided in shelter reinforcement after storms. Every tool had multiple applications, and every successful adaptation increased the chances of surviving both predictable challenges and sudden disasters. The creation and maintenance of tools also had a social dimension. Knowledge of flaking techniques, hafting, and sewing was shared within the group, often passed from elders to younger members. Skills were honed through observation, practice, and guidance, creating a form of early apprenticeship. In this way, tools became a cultural as well as a practical legacy, binding generations together through shared knowledge and reinforcing social cohesion during the isolating months of winter. The contrast between human vulnerability and tool effectiveness is striking. Without tools, a caveman's strength would have been insufficient to hunt large animals, repair shelters, or process hides. With tools, even the physically weaker members of the group could contribute meaningfully, hunting, repairing, and surviving alongside stronger individuals. Tools effectively leveled the playing field between humans and their environment, transforming potential weakness into opportunity. Tools were also a vehicle for innovation. Over time, designs evolved in response to challenges. Sharper edges, lighter shafts, and more durable hafting methods emerged from repeated trial and error. Each new development increased efficiency, reduced risk, and ensured that survival strategies became progressively more reliable. In essence, tools were both an extension of human intelligence and a protective barrier against the raw power of the Ice Age. In the frozen expanse of prehistoric winters, the story of survival cannot be told without tools. They were as essential as fire, as crucial as shelter, and as transformative as cooperation. Each stone flake, bone implement, or wooden shaft embodied the ingenuity, perseverance, and adaptability of early humans. Through these tools, fragile bodies were amplified, weaknesses mitigated, and the odds of enduring relentless winters improved. They were instruments of survival, innovation, and ultimately, triumph in a world that demanded every ounce of human skill. The Ice Age world was not empty. It teemed with life, but survival depended on understanding the rhythm, behavior, and dangers of its animal inhabitants. Cavemen shared the frozen landscape with a diverse array of creatures, from massive mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses to cunning predators like wolves, cave lions, and bears. Each species presented both opportunity and threat, shaping the strategies humans employed for hunting, shelter, and survival. Winter intensified these dynamics, as scarcity forced animals and humans alike to adapt, migrate, and confront the harsh realities of frozen life. Large herbivores were central to winter survival. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses provided meat, hides, bones, and fat, resources critical for food, clothing, and shelter reinforcement. Yet hunting them was perilous. These animals were not only massive and powerful, but they were often in herds, alert to danger, and capable of defending themselves with tusks, horns, or sheer force. Winter conditions added complexity. Deep snow slowed both hunters and prey, but it also left tracks that could be followed for miles. Early humans developed sophisticated strategies to exploit these opportunities, using traps, coordinated drives, and ambushes to capture game, often working in groups to overcome the animal's natural defenses. Predators posed a constant threat, but they also offered lessons in survival. Wolves and cave lions were agile and adapted to the cold, capable of hunting in packs or stalking silently across snowfields. Bears hibernated partially but emerged during harsh winters in search of food, creating sudden and dangerous encounters. Cavemen had to remain vigilant at all times, observing predator behaviors, noting den locations, and ensuring that fires and shelters provided protection. The presence of these predators heightened the importance of teamwork, strategy, and defensive measures. Even a minor lapse could result in tragedy, underscoring the thin margin between life and death. Smaller creatures also played a critical role. Rabbits, birds, and fish were less dangerous but equally essential for winter diets. Catching these animals required skill, patience, and ingenuity, setting snares, constructing traps, or improvising fishing techniques through ice. Every small contribution of protein and fat added to the group's resilience. In winter, when large game was scarce or inaccessible, these smaller prey could mean the difference between survival and starvation, reinforcing the idea that no resource was too minor to exploit. Cavemen observed animal behavior with remarkable attention to detail. Migration patterns, herd movements, and predator activity informed decisions about hunting locations, timing, and shelter placement. Tracks in the snow were not random. They told stories of direction, speed, and vulnerability. Understanding these patterns allowed humans to anticipate where to find food and how to avoid danger. This knowledge, accumulated and shared within tribes, became a vital survival skill, intertwining anthropology with practical strategy. The contrast between human vulnerability and animal adaptation was stark. Fur, fat, claws, and instinct gave animals advantages that humans lacked, forcing early humans to rely on intelligence, cooperation, and technology. Tools, fire, and reinforced shelters leveled the playing field, allowing humans to not only survive alongside these creatures, but to utilize them as resources. Every hunt, every observation, and every encounter became a lesson in adaptation and resilience, highlighting the delicate balance of the Ice Age ecosystem. Animals also shaped cultural and spiritual life. Many species were revered, feared, or mythologized, appearing in cave paintings and oral traditions. Mammoths might symbolize strength, wolves cunning, and lions dominance. These beliefs were not merely symbolic. They reinforced knowledge of the natural world, guided hunting rituals, and provided psychological frameworks to interpret the dangers and opportunities of winter survival. The line between survival, respect, and myth blurred, illustrating the profound influence animals had on human thought, behavior, and culture. Ultimately, understanding the animals of winter was inseparable from understanding human survival itself. They were food and threat, teachers and companions, shaping not only the strategies of hunting and shelter, but also the rhythms of daily life. By observing, learning, and adapting to these creatures, early humans could navigate the frozen world with greater confidence and effectiveness. The Ice Age was as much about coexistence with animals as it was about endurance against cold, and mastery over this relationship was central to the story of prehistoric winter survival. In the harsh, frozen expanses of the Ice Age, survival depended not only on physical strength, fire, and food, but also on the human need for meaning, structure, and hope. Winter, with its long nights, relentless storms, and scarcity of resources, inspired rituals and beliefs that helped early humans cope with fear and uncertainty. These practices were both practical and spiritual. They reinforced cooperation, transmitted survival knowledge, and provided psychological resilience against the ever-present threats of cold, hunger, and predation. In essence, rituals and beliefs were tools as vital as spears or shelters, shaping human behavior and fortifying the mind for the trials of winter. Cavemen developed winter-specific rituals to manage fear and uncertainty. The beginning of the winter season might be marked with offerings of food or symbolic objects, intended to appease spirits or ensure the continued abundance of game. Such rituals created a sense of control in a world where survival often felt arbitrary. They allowed tribes to collectively acknowledge the dangers ahead and mentally prepare for the months of scarcity and cold. These acts fostered cohesion, reminding each member that their survival was intertwined with the actions and responsibilities of the group. Fire itself became a focal point for ritual and symbolism. Fires were not only sources of warmth, but also sacred spaces where stories were told, plans were made, and bonds were strengthened. The act of tending fire, feeding it with dry wood or bones, and preserving embers through storms was ritualized. It was a daily acknowledgement of life's fragility and a celebration of human ingenuity. The fire's glow in a dark, cold shelter represented more than light. It symbolized continuity, protection, and the triumph of life over the merciless winter landscape. Rituals extended to hunting as well. Before a dangerous hunt, groups might perform ceremonies to honor the animals they pursued, asking for successful kills while expressing gratitude for the life that would sustain them. Such practices reflected a deep understanding of interdependence. Humans depended on animals for food, clothing, and shelter, and respecting these creatures reinforced sustainable behaviors. These rituals also served to psychologically prepare hunters, focusing their minds, coordinating group strategy, and reinforcing social hierarchies and responsibilities. Belief systems also emerge around natural phenomena. Snowstorms, freezing winds, and auroras could be interpreted as messages from unseen forces, guiding decisions about when to hunt, migrate, or reinforce shelters. Celestial patterns, such as the movement of stars and the sun's angle, were observed for seasonal predictions, blending practical knowledge with spiritual interpretation. In this way, early humans integrated environmental observation into their belief systems, creating a cognitive framework that combined survival skills with a sense of cosmic order. Rituals and beliefs also played a critical role in mental resilience. Long winters, isolation, and repeated exposure to danger could erode morale. Storytelling, songs, and symbolic art provided psychological relief and cultural continuity, reminding humans of the collective strength of the tribe. Cave paintings depicting hunts, animals, and mythological scenes may have been more than artistic expression. They were a way to encode survival knowledge, celebrate past victories, and instill courage. For a caveman huddled in a shelter during a blizzard, these rituals and shared beliefs reinforced the sense that they were not alone, that survival was possible, and that the tribe would endure. The contrast between fear and hope, vulnerability and resilience, is evident in these winter practices. Rituals were born from necessity, but they transcended mere practicality, providing structure, meaning, and a psychological shield against the hardships of Ice Age life. They bridge the gap between life and death, transforming fear into action and uncertainty into collective wisdom. Ultimately, winter rituals and beliefs illustrate the profound adaptability of early humans. They show that survival was not only physical but also cultural and psychological. Through ritual, humans negotiated their relationship with nature, animals, and each other, creating systems of meaning that guided behavior, strengthened bonds, and reinforced strategies for enduring one of the harshest environments in human history. In the frozen wilderness, belief and practice were inseparable from survival, illuminating the extraordinary depth of human ingenuity and spirit. In the bleak and frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, family and social structures were as essential to survival as fire, food, and shelter. Winter amplified the challenges of existence, forcing early humans to rely not only on their own strength and ingenuity, but also on the support and cooperation of the group. Daily life revolved around the shared struggle against cold, hunger, and danger, making family units and tribal networks the foundation of endurance. These social bonds were more than emotional. They were strategic, practical, and vital for the continuation of life. Cavemen lived in small groups, often extended families or close-knit tribes, which allowed them to pool resources and skills. Every member had a role. Hunters and gatherers ventured into frozen plains, often in coordinated efforts to track and capture animals. Women and elders processed meat, prepared clothing, and maintained shelters. Children learned survival skills from observation and participation. The division of labor ensured that even the most vulnerable members contributed to the group's overall resilience. Cooperation was not optional. It was a matter of life or death. Winter intensified the need for collaboration. Heavy snow, icy winds, and long nights made solo activities perilous. Hunting alone could mean exposure, injury, or death. Gathering firewood or food without assistance risked frostbite and exhaustion. Shared labor allowed tasks to be completed efficiently and safely, reinforcing trust and interdependence. The rhythm of daily life was organized around these cooperative endeavors, from morning fire tending to evening meals and shelter reinforcement. Social cohesion became a survival strategy, as much as a cultural norm. Inside shelters, social life took on additional dimensions. Fires provided warmth and light, creating spaces for storytelling, teaching, and communal decision-making. Knowledge of animal behavior, tool-making, and shelter repair was passed orally, often accompanied by demonstrations, games, or practical exercises. Predators were both competitors and teachers. Wolves, traveling in coordinated packs, often followed migrating herds, which humans also hunted. Their tracking, hunting, and ambush strategies forced early humans to develop stealth, observation, and collaborative techniques. Cave lions and hyenas presented solitary but deadly threats, capable of overpowering even the strongest adult. Bears, emerging from hibernation or defending scarce food sources, added unpredictability. Every predator encounter tested human ingenuity, coordination, and adaptability, reinforcing the vital link between survival and situational awareness. Shelter played a central role in defense. Reinforced walls, low entrances, and carefully placed fire pits created protective barriers against prowling carnivores. Fire served both as warmth and deterrence, while smoke could mask human scent or confuse predators. Groups often slept in clusters, sharing body heat and vigilance, with rotations for night watches to monitor for approaching danger. Even simple structural improvements, such as bracing walls or adding extra layers of hides, significantly increased the group's chance of fending off attacks. The synergy between fire, shelter, and social coordination formed the backbone of predator defense strategies. Hunting and predator encounters were closely linked. Understanding predator behavior helped humans anticipate their movements and avoid surprise attacks. Tracking signs like footprints, scat, or claw marks informed safe travel routes and hunting locations. In some cases, humans may have used the presence of larger predators strategically. For example, hunting in areas where wolves had recently passed, capitalizing on weakened or displaced prey. Knowledge of predator psychology, gained through careful observation over generations, became a critical survival tool. Weapons and tools amplified defensive capability. Spears, stone-tipped arrows, clubs, and fire-hardened stakes could deter predators or provide last resort protection during close encounters. Teams coordinated defensive measures, creating barriers or traps, and relying on their combined strength to protect weaker group members. Even the smallest innovations, a sharpened stick, a fortified entrance, or a clever fire placement, could tip the balance between life and death. The effectiveness of these tools depended not only on design, but on skill, planning, and teamwork. The social dimension of predator defense was paramount. Survival was never a solo endeavor. It required trust, coordination, and communication. Early humans developed strategies for signaling danger, warning each other of predator presence, and mobilizing collective responses. Cooperation in these high-stakes situations strengthened social bonds and reinforced the group's hierarchy, with experienced hunters or leaders directing defensive tactics. The constant negotiation between human vulnerability and predator aggression fostered a culture of vigilance and adaptability that defined life in the winter wilderness. The contrast between threat and security underscores the importance of adaptation. Predators embodied strength, speed, and instinct, while humans relied on intelligence, innovation, and cooperation. By combining fire, tools, reinforced shelters, observation, and teamwork, early humans could mitigate the inherent dangers of the Ice Age. Every successful defense reinforced techniques, transmitted knowledge, and increased the tribe's chances of surviving subsequent winters. Through these interactions, younger generations learned critical survival skills, while elders reinforced authority and guidance. The shelter became not just a physical haven, but a center of cultural transmission, where history, tactics, and values were preserved. Emotional bonds were equally critical. Long winters were psychologically taxing, and isolation or fear could erode morale. Physical closeness, mutual care, and shared experiences provided comfort and reassurance. Children were protected, encouraged, and nurtured, while adults relied on each other to maintain mental and emotional strength. Laughter, play, and shared storytelling became tools to mitigate stress, reinforcing the idea that survival was as much about psychological resilience as physical endurance. Social hierarchies and leadership also emerged within these winter communities. Decision-making regarding hunting strategies, migration, shelter building, and resource distribution required coordination. Leaders often earned respect through skill, wisdom, and the ability to maintain group safety. Yet authority was balanced by cooperation. No single individual could survive alone in the frozen world. Social structures were thus flexible, adaptive, and shaped directly by environmental pressures. The contrast between external dangers and internal cohesion is stark. Outside, storms, predators, and scarcity threatened life. Inside, warmth, cooperation, and communication created strength and continuity. The effectiveness of these social bonds often determined which groups survived and which perished. Tribes that maintained strong networks, clear roles, and mutual support were more likely to endure harsh winters, demonstrating that human survival was inseparable from the quality of relationships and collaboration. Family and social life also intertwined with cultural practices. Rituals, celebrations, and shared storytelling reinforced community identity and transmitted survival knowledge. Children learned through imitation and participation, ensuring that crucial skills, fire maintenance, hunting, tool-making, and shelter reinforcement, were passed down. Social bonds thus became both a practical and cultural strategy, uniting emotional, educational, and survival imperatives into a single, resilient system. Ultimately, winter survival was a group endeavor. Fire, food, and tools were important, but they were amplified by cooperation, care, and communication within family units and tribes. Ice Age humans endured because they recognized that their strength lay not only in their own bodies or minds, but in the collective effort of the group. Family and social life provided warmth, safety, and continuity, a living network of resilience that made survival in one of Earth's harshest climates possible. Winter forced prehistoric humans to confront a stark reality. Remaining in one place could mean certain death if food ran out, shelters failed, or conditions became too extreme. Migration was not just an occasional decision. It was a calculated response to survival pressures. Traveling across frozen plains, navigating icy rivers, and traversing snow-laden forests were feats of endurance and strategy. These journeys were perilous, demanding careful planning, knowledge of terrain, and an understanding of seasonal animal movements. Migration was a high-stakes gamble, where each step could lead to sustenance and safety, or frostbite, starvation, and exposure. Groups carefully timed their movements. Early humans observed environmental cues: the thickening of ice on rivers, the tracks of migrating herds, and the changing behavior of predators. Timing was everything. Moving too early could leave the group exposed to storms or unstable ice. Waiting too long risked dwindling food stores and deteriorating shelter conditions. Winter migration required precision, coordination, and intimate knowledge of the landscape. It was a form of survival intelligence, balancing immediate needs with long-term strategy, and ensuring that the group could endure the harshest months. Logistics of travel in winter demanded innovation. Snow and ice slowed movement, making traditional walking exhausting. Humans developed rudimentary sleds, dragging food, tools, and firewood across frozen terrain. They used animal skins to wrap themselves for insulation, and sometimes relied on paths created by migrating herds to navigate deep snow. Knowledge of natural shelters, caves, and rock overhangs along the route was essential for short-term refuge. Even small mistakes, such as misjudging distances or underestimating cold exposure, could result in severe injury or death. Survival depended on preparation, skill, and careful observation of both environment and wildlife. Migration also carried social implications. Moving an entire group required coordination. Families, elders, hunters, and children had to travel together, balancing speed with safety. Roles were clear. Hunters scouted ahead, women and children managed supplies, and leaders made strategic decisions based on terrain and weather conditions. These journeys strengthened group cohesion, as survival depended on mutual trust and shared effort. Cooperation was amplified under the extreme conditions of winter travel, highlighting the interdependence that had allowed humans to survive in harsh climates for millennia. Encounters with predators intensified during migration. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores followed prey and, by extension, often trailed human groups. Traveling in open, snow-covered landscapes exposed humans to visibility and vulnerability. Fires at night, watch rotations, and strategic placement of the group while resting were essential tactics to avoid attacks. The cold also slowed potential responses, making vigilance and preemptive measures critical. Migration was not merely a physical challenge. It was a constant negotiation with risk, requiring awareness and adaptability at every step. Winter migration was often driven by food scarcity. Large game moved across vast distances in search of grazing areas, and early humans had to track these movements to secure sustenance. Fishable rivers could freeze, forcing relocation to unfrozen streams or lakes. Gathering sites for roots and tubers were only seasonally accessible, requiring precise timing. The interplay between human and animal movement was a continuous cycle, where understanding the behavior of prey dictated human decisions and survival. Despite the dangers, migration offered opportunity. New areas could provide richer food sources, safer shelters, and better firewood supplies. Observing the landscape, humans learned to identify hidden caves, fertile hunting grounds, and secure shelter locations that would support life through harsh winters. Migration was not just a response to scarcity. It was an exploration of the environment, a process of mapping survival routes, and a demonstration of human resilience and ingenuity. The contrast between immobility and movement underscores the stakes of Ice Age life. Staying in one place could conserve energy but risk depletion of resources, while movement demanded labor, exposed the group to new threats, and tested endurance. The balance required careful judgment, planning, and cooperation. Those who mastered migration patterns were more likely to survive and thrive. Those who failed often disappeared into the unforgiving landscape, leaving behind little trace of their existence. Ultimately, migration and journeys in winter were an extension of human intelligence, adaptability, and determination. They combined physical endurance, strategic thinking, and social cohesion, demonstrating that survival in the Ice Age depended not only on strength and tools, but also on careful planning, observation, and cooperation. Each successful migration was a triumph for human resilience, a living testament to the ingenuity and courage required to endure the frozen world. The frozen landscapes of the Ice Age presented a dual threat. Not only were cavemen exposed to predators and harsh weather, but illness and injury could quickly become fatal. Winter compounded every health risk, slowing recovery, reducing mobility, and limiting access to resources. A broken limb, frostbite, or even a minor infection could escalate rapidly if untreated, making the ability to cope with sickness and injury as critical to survival as hunting, shelter, or fire. Early humans had to develop both practical strategies and communal support systems to face these invisible yet lethal challenges. Injuries were commonplace in daily life, whether from hunting, constructing shelters, or traversing icy terrain. Stone-tipped weapons and heavy bones offer the means to hunt and build, but they also carry the risk of accidental wounds. Cuts, punctures, and broken bones required immediate attention. Cavemen employed natural remedies whenever possible, using medicinal plants, cold compresses, or animal fats to treat wounds. Frostbite and hypothermia were constant winter threats. Exposed skin, insufficient insulation, or wet clothing could result in severe tissue damage or death within hours. Cavemen learned to monitor each other closely, checking extremities for signs of cold injury and ensuring that everyone remained near the fire during storms. Clothing made from layered furs, properly insulated shelters, and constant fire maintenance were preventative strategies, while warming techniques, such as rotating body heat within communal sleeping areas, helped treat early signs of cold injury. These measures demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of human physiology and the importance of communal care. Illnesses, though less visible than injuries, were equally dangerous. Respiratory infections, digestive problems, and fevers could spread rapidly within confined space of shelter. Early humans mitigated these risks by maintaining fire and smoke circulation, isolating the sick when possible, and rationing resources to prevent weakness. In some cases, ritual practices, blending observation with symbolic belief, were employed to restore balance and comfort to the afflicted. Though primitive by modern standards, these strategies reflect an intuitive grasp of hygiene, containment, and care. Social support played a crucial role in coping with health challenges. Survival depended not only on the individual's resilience, but also on the attentiveness and skill of the group. Elders and experienced members guided treatments, shared knowledge of medicinal plants, and coordinated care. Children observed and learned, ensuring continuation of critical survival knowledge. This communal approach enhanced the odds of recovery, strengthened bonds, and reinforced the principle that human life in winter was a collective effort, dependent on cooperation as much as on tools or fire. The psychological component of illness and injury cannot be overlooked. Facing physical vulnerability in a frozen, predator-filled environment could induce fear and despair. The presence of supportive group members, regular storytelling, and ritual practices provided emotional strength, helping the sick or injured maintain hope and mental resilience. The mind became a battlefield alongside the body, and maintaining morale could mean the difference between recovery and demise. The contrast between vulnerability and adaptation is stark. While the environment was indifferent, humans responded with ingenuity, resourcefulness, and collaboration. Natural remedies, makeshift splints, clothing innovations, fire management, and communal care collectively created a survival framework that mitigated the effects of illness and injury. Every recovery reinforced techniques, transmitted knowledge, and increased the tribe's resilience for future winters. Leaves, moss, and bark could serve as bandages, while splints made from wood or bone stabilized fractures. Knowledge of these methods was passed down orally, forming an essential component of group survival. Frostbite and hypothermia were constant winter threats. Exposed skin, insufficient insulation, or wet clothing could result in severe tissue damage or death within hours. Cavemen learned to monitor each other closely, checking extremities for signs of cold injury and ensuring that everyone remained near the fire during storms. Clothing made from layered furs, properly insulated shelters, and constant fire maintenance were preventative strategies, while warming techniques, such as rotating body heat within communal sleeping areas, helped treat early signs of cold injury. These measures demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of human physiology and the importance of communal care. Illnesses, though less visible than injuries, were equally dangerous. Respiratory infections, digestive problems, and fevers could spread rapidly within a confined space of a shelter. Early humans mitigated these risks by maintaining fire and smoke circulation, isolating the sick when possible, and rationing resources to prevent weakness. In some cases, ritual practices, blending observation with symbolic belief, were employed to restore balance and comfort to the afflicted. Though primitive by modern standards, these strategies reflect an intuitive grasp of hygiene, containment, and care. Social support played a crucial role in coping with health challenges. Survival depended not only on the individual's resilience, but also on the attentiveness and skill of the group. Elders and experienced members guided treatments, shared knowledge of medicinal plants, and coordinated care. Children observed and learned, ensuring continuation of critical survival knowledge. This communal approach enhanced the odds of recovery, strengthened bonds, and reinforced the principle that human life in winter was a collective effort, dependent on cooperation as much as on tools or fire. The psychological component of illness and injury cannot be overlooked. Facing physical vulnerability in a frozen, predator-filled environment could induce fear and despair. The presence of supportive group members, regular storytelling, and ritual practices provided emotional strength, helping the sick or injured maintain hope and mental resilience. The mind became a battlefield alongside the body, and maintaining morale could mean the difference between recovery and demise. The contrast between vulnerability and adaptation is stark. While the environment was indifferent, humans responded with ingenuity, resourcefulness, and collaboration. Natural remedies, makeshift splints, clothing innovations, fire management, and communal care collectively created a survival framework that mitigated the effect of illness and injury. Every recovery reinforced techniques, transmitted knowledge, and increased the tribe's resilience for future winters. Ultimately, coping with illness and injury in winter illustrates a profound adaptability of early humans. Survival was never merely about physical strength or hunting prowess. It relied equally on intelligence, observation, social bonds, and resourcefulness. By confronting the invisible dangers of illness and injury with practical strategies and communal support, Ice Age humans demonstrated a depth of resilience that allowed them not just to endure the frozen world, but to thrive in it. In the icy expanse of the Ice Age, survival depended as much on vigilance against predators as on securing food, fire, and shelter. Wolves, cave lions, bears, and other formidable carnivores roamed the frozen landscape, hungry and opportunistic. Their presence shaped every aspect of human behavior, from hunting techniques to shelter design, fire management, and social organization. Winter amplified the dangers. Deep snow slowed human movement, reducing escape options, while scarce prey made predators more aggressive and bold. Understanding, anticipating, and defending against these threats was a matter of life and death. Predators were both competitors and teachers. Wolves, traveling in coordinated packs, often followed migrating herds, which humans also hunted. Their tracking, hunting, and ambush strategies forced early humans to develop stealth, observation, and collaborative techniques. Cave lions and hyenas presented solitary but deadly threats, capable of overpowering even the strongest adult. Bears, emerging from hibernation or defending scarce food sources, added unpredictability. Every predator encounter tested human ingenuity, coordination, and adaptability, reinforcing the vital link between survival and situational awareness. Shelter played a central role in defense. Reinforced walls, low entrances, and carefully placed fire pits created protective barriers against prowling carnivores. Fires served both as warmth and deterrence, while smoke could mask human scent or confuse predators. Groups often slept in clusters, sharing body heat and vigilance, with rotations for night watches to monitor for approaching danger. Even simple structural improvements, such as bracing walls or adding extra layers of hides, significantly increased the group's chance of fending off attacks. The synergy between fire, shelter, and social coordination formed the backbone of predator defense strategies. Hunting and predator encounters were closely linked. Understanding predator behavior helped humans anticipate their movements and avoid surprise attacks. Migration also carried social implications. Moving an entire group required coordination. Families, elders, hunters, and children had to travel together, balancing speed with safety. Roles were clear. Hunters scouted ahead, women and children managed supplies, and leaders made strategic decisions based on terrain and weather conditions. These journeys strengthened group cohesion, as survival depended on mutual trust and shared effort. Cooperation was amplified under the extreme conditions of winter travel, highlighting the interdependence that had allowed humans to survive in harsh climates for millennia. Encounters with predators intensified during migration. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores followed prey and, by extension, often trailed human groups. Traveling in open, snow-covered landscapes exposed humans to visibility and vulnerability. Fires at night, watch rotations, and strategic placement of the group while resting were essential tactics to avoid attacks. The cold also slowed potential responses, making vigilance and preemptive measures critical. Migration was not merely a physical challenge. It was a constant negotiation with risk, requiring awareness and adaptability at every step. Winter migration was often driven by food scarcity. Large game moved across vast distances in search of grazing areas, and early humans had to track these movements to secure sustenance. Fishable rivers could freeze, forcing relocation on frozen streams or lakes. Gathering sites for roots and tubers were only seasonally accessible, requiring precise timing. The interplay between human and animal movement was a continuous cycle, where understanding the behavior of prey dictated human decisions and survival. Despite the dangers, migration offered opportunity. New areas could provide richer food sources, safer shelters, and better firewood supplies. Observing the landscape, humans learned to identify hidden caves, fertile hunting grounds, and secure shelter locations that would support life through harsh winters. Migration was not just a response to scarcity. It was an exploration of the environment, a process of mapping survival routes, and a demonstration of human resilience and ingenuity. The contrast between immobility and movement underscores the stakes of Ice Age life. Staying in one place could conserve energy but risk depletion of resources, while movement demanded labor, exposed the group to new threats, and tested endurance. The balance required careful judgment, planning, and cooperation. Those who mastered migration patterns were more likely to survive and thrive. Those who failed often disappeared into the unforgiving landscape, leaving behind little trace of their existence. Tracking signs like footprints, scat, or claw marks informed safe travel routes and hunting locations. In some cases, humans may have used the presence of larger predators strategically. For example, hunting in areas where wolves had recently passed, capitalizing on weakened or displaced prey. Knowledge of predator psychology, gained through careful observation over generations, became a critical survival tool. Weapons and tools amplified defensive capability. Spears, stone-tipped arrows, clubs, and fire-hardened stakes could deter predators or provide last-resort protection during close encounters. Teams coordinated defensive measures, creating barriers or traps and relying on their combined strength to protect weaker group members. Even the smallest innovations, a sharpened stick, a fortified entrance, or a clever fire placement, could tip the balance between life and death. The effectiveness of these tools depended not only on design, but on skill, planning, and teamwork. The social dimension of predator defense was paramount. Survival was never a solo endeavor. It required trust, coordination, and communication. Early humans developed strategies for signaling danger, warning each other of predator presence, and mobilizing collective responses. Cooperation in these high-stakes situations strengthened social bonds and reinforced the group's hierarchy, with experienced hunters or leaders directing defensive tactics. The constant negotiation between human vulnerability and predator aggression fostered a culture of vigilance and adaptability that defined life in the winter wilderness. The contrast between threat and security underscores the importance of adaptation. Predators embodied strength, speed, and instinct, while humans relied on intelligence, innovation, and cooperation. By combining fire, tools, reinforced shelters, observation, and teamwork, early humans could mitigate the inherent dangers of the Ice Age. Every successful defense reinforced techniques, transmitted knowledge, and increased the tribe's chances of surviving subsequent winters. Ultimately, winter predators were not just enemies but catalysts for human ingenuity and social cohesion. The necessity of defending against these formidable creatures pushed early humans to refine strategies, innovate tools, and deepen cooperative bonds. Mastery over the natural threats of the frozen landscape became an essential dimension of survival, illustrating how danger, intelligence, and social structure intertwined to sustain life in one of Earth's harshest environments. The harsh, unforgiving winters of the Ice Age were more than a test of physical endurance. They were a crucible in which human ingenuity, resilience, and social cohesion were forged. Every aspect of survival, from fire-making and hunting to shelter construction and predator defense, left enduring lessons for early humans. These lessons were not abstract. They were practical, cultural, and psychological, forming the foundation of human adaptation that would echo through millennia. By studying the strategies employed by Ice Age humans, we gain insight into the ingenuity, perseverance, and foresight that allowed our ancestors to thrive in a world that constantly challenged life itself. One of the central lessons of Ice Age winters is the importance of preparation. Survival required anticipating scarcity, extreme weather, and danger. Cavemen had to collect and store food, maintain and protect fires, reinforce shelters after every snowstorm, and plan for the unpredictable movements of prey and predators. Winter taught that foresight, planning, and resource management were not luxuries. They were essential skills that determined life or death. These practices highlight an early understanding of risk, reward, and the consequences of inaction. Cooperation and social cohesion were equally critical lessons. Early humans could not survive alone in the frozen landscape. Every task, from hunting to caring for the sick, relied on teamwork. Families and tribes developed complex systems of division of labor, communication, and leadership. Nightly gatherings around the fire, the passing down of survival knowledge, and coordinated hunting strategies reinforced the social fabric that allowed groups to endure. The lesson was clear. Intelligence and strength were amplified when humans worked together, and survival depended on mutual support and collective effort. Adaptation and innovation were constant requirements. Ice Age humans developed specialized tools, refined hunting techniques, and optimized shelter designs to cope with the cold and scarcity. They learned to observe animal behavior, weather patterns, and the landscape itself, applying that knowledge to every decision. Fire was not just a source of warmth. It was a tool, a deterrent, and a focal point for social and ritual activity. Clothing, food preservation, and migration strategies reflected a sophisticated understanding of environmental challenges and human limitations. Adaptation was a daily necessity, teaching the value of observation, experimentation, and flexibility in the face of relentless change. Psychological resilience emerged as another crucial lesson. The long nights, isolation, and constant threats of winter tested the mind as much as the body. Rituals, storytelling, and shared experiences help maintain morale, transmit knowledge, and provide meaning. Beliefs, whether symbolic or practical, reinforce a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Mental strength became inseparable from physical survival, illustrating that endurance was as much about mindset as it was about muscle or tool-making. Ice Age winters also emphasize the interconnection between humans and nature. Survival required respect for the land, animals, and resources. Observing migration patterns, understanding predator behavior, and recognizing the seasonal availability of plants and animals allowed humans to thrive without depleting essential resources. These lessons in ecological awareness and sustainable practices reveal an early understanding of balance, demonstrating that humans could manipulate their environment intelligently without severing ties to the natural world. The contrast between vulnerability and ingenuity defines the overarching lesson of Ice Age winters. Humans were physically weaker than many predators, exposed to extreme weather, and dependent on fragile resources. Yet through intelligence, innovation, cooperation, and observation, they turned adversity into opportunity. Every reinforced shelter, every fire stoked, every hunt carefully planned, and every ritual performed was an affirmation of human resilience. The frozen world demanded excellence in survival, and early humans rose to meet the challenge, laying the groundwork for civilizations to come. Ultimately, the winters of the Ice Age teach us that survival is multidimensional. It is not merely about tools or fire, but about foresight, cooperation, adaptability, psychological strength, and respect for the environment. The story of Ice Age humans reminds us that the greatest lessons are often forged under the harshest conditions. Their endurance, ingenuity, and social cohesion illuminate the remarkable capacity of humans to survive, adapt, and thrive against overwhelming odds. These lessons echo across time, providing insight into both our past and the enduring strategies that define human resilience today. As the last snowstorms of winter settle over the ancient landscape, the story of Ice Age humans comes into sharp focus. These early humans face a world that was as beautiful as it was brutal. Vast plains blanketed in snow, frozen rivers shimmering in pale sunlight, and forests etched with the footprints of both prey and predator. Every day was a negotiation with nature, a constant balancing act between survival and vulnerability, warmth and cold, life and death. The lives of cavemen were defined not by leisure or comfort, but by intelligence, courage, and the unwavering will to endure the harshest conditions imaginable. At the heart of survival was the ability to anticipate and prepare. Food had to be hunted, preserved, and rationed. Shelters had to be reinforced against snowstorms and icy winds. Tools had to be crafted, maintained, and used with precision. Fire had to be stoked daily, preserved across nights, and guarded against gusting winter winds. Every action was intentional, a calculated effort to convert vulnerability into security. The lessons of preparation were clear. Foresight, diligence, and planning were not optional. They were survival imperatives. Those who mastered these practices could endure months of scarcity and cold, while those who failed often succumbed to exposure, starvation, or predation. Social cohesion and cooperation were equally critical. The Ice Age was not a landscape for solitary survival. Life was impossible without collective effort. Families and tribal units developed intricate divisions of labor. Hunters tracked prey across frozen plains. Women and elders processed meat, sewed hides, and maintained fire, while children observed and learned essential skills. Communication, trust, and shared responsibility became central to every success. Nightly gatherings around fires, communal meals, and cooperative shelter reinforcement were not mere routines. They were lifelines. The ability to work as a cohesive unit amplified human intelligence and strength, creating a multiplier effect that made survival possible despite the formidable challenges of winter. Winter life also taught humans the power of adaptation and innovation. Tools evolved from simple stone flakes to sophisticated composite implements, combining stone, bone, antler, and wood. Clothing, layered and insulated, protected against frostbite. Hunting strategies became increasingly precise, leveraging animal behavior, tracks, and migration patterns. Even shelter design reflected creativity and strategic thinking, with reinforced walls, hidden entrances, and fire placements that maximize warmth and minimize vulnerability. Adaptation was continuous and iterative. Every storm, every predator encounter, every fail hunt provided lessons that shaped future strategies. The Ice Age, in its relentless pressure, became the ultimate teacher of ingenuity and problem-solving. Another cornerstone of survival was psychological resilience. Harsh winters, isolation, and the constant threat of death tested the mind as much as the body. Cavemen developed rituals, storytelling traditions, and communal practices that mitigated fear and instilled hope. Firelight illuminated not only the shelter but also the human spirit, creating a sense of continuity and belonging. Beliefs and symbolic practices, whether invoking spirits, honoring animals, or marking seasonal changes, provided structure in an unpredictable world. The mind was as much a battlefield as the frozen landscape. Courage, optimism, and mental flexibility were vital survival tools. The relationship with animals and the environment was another profound lesson. Ice Age humans were both predators and students of nature. Observing migration, predator behavior, and seasonal patterns allowed them to hunt effectively, avoid danger, and plan migrations. At the same time, respect for prey and ecological balance was essential. Overhunting or reckless behavior could jeopardize survival. This interplay between humans and animals fostered a deep ecological intelligence, a nuanced understanding that survival depended not only on domination, but also on observation, adaptation, and coexistence. The frozen wilderness was a teacher, shaping strategies that combined practical skill with environmental awareness. Cultural continuity emerged as a natural extension of these survival strategies. Rituals, art, and oral traditions encoded knowledge and reinforced social bonds. Cave paintings depicting hunts, seasonal animals, and symbolic imagery were more than aesthetic expression. They were records of experience, strategies, and communal memory. Knowledge of fire management, tool-making, and winter survival was embedded in these cultural practices, ensuring that lessons learned were preserved and transmitted across generations. Culture, in this sense, was survival in narrative form, a bridge between knowledge and action. The contrast between vulnerability and ingenuity defines the enduring story of Ice Age humans. Physically, they were weaker than most predators, exposed to freezing temperatures and unpredictable storms, yet they turned these disadvantages into advantages through creativity, cooperation, and observation. Every shelter, every fire, every spear, and every coordinated hunt was a testament to human resilience. Every ritual, every story, and every shared meal reinforced social cohesion and psychological endurance. These contrasts between danger and innovation, isolation and community, fear and hope, illustrate the full spectrum of human adaptability and the delicate balance required for survival. Lessons from the Ice Age extend beyond physical survival. They are lessons in foresight, resilience, and collaboration. Humans learned to anticipate challenges, to work collectively, to innovate tools and strategies, and to maintain mental fortitude. They understood that survival was multidimensional, integrating practical skill, social intelligence, and emotional resilience. These lessons shaped human evolution, laying the foundation for future societies, technologies, and cultural practices. The Ice Age was not only a period of endurance, it was a crucible in which humanity's defining characteristics, ingenuity, cooperation, and adaptability, were refined and strengthened. The The legacy of these early humans also reminds us of the interconnectedness of life and environment. Survival required respect for nature, observation of animal behavior, and careful management of resources. Over thousands of winters, humans learned to coexist with predators, follow migrations, and sustainably harvest plants and animals. These practices were not theoretical. They were essential for life itself. In their strategies and adaptations, Ice Age humans demonstrated that intelligence is most effective when combined with respect for the natural world and an understanding of ecological balance. Finally, the story of Ice Age winter survival is ultimately a story of human courage, persistence, and hope. Despite freezing temperatures, scarce resources, and constant danger, humans endured. They adapted, innovated, cooperated, and learned. They transformed vulnerability into capability, danger into knowledge, and fear into strategy. These lessons, forged under some of the harshest conditions Earth has ever known, remain timeless. They remind us that survival is not only about physical strength, but about foresight, intelligence, social bonds, and resilience of spirit. Ice Age humans thrived not because they were the strongest, but because they were the wisest, the most adaptable, and the most persistent. In reflecting on their experience, we can appreciate the profound complexity of prehistoric life. It was a life of challenges and contrasts, of threats and triumphs, of hunger and innovation, of isolation and communal strength. Winter was the ultimate test, and humans passed it through a combination of preparation, cooperation, innovation, and psychological endurance. These lessons resonate today, reminding us of the power of human ingenuity and the enduring importance of social cohesion, adaptability, and resilience in the face of adversity. The Ice Age may have ended tens of thousands of years ago, but its lessons endure. The strategies, innovations, and cultural practices developed to survive winter's harshness laid the groundwork for the evolution of human civilization. By studying these lessons, we gain insight not only into the past, but also into timeless principles of endurance, creativity, and community. Ice Age humans remind us that even in the coldest, most unforgiving conditions, life persists through intelligence, cooperation, and unwavering determination. Their story is the story of humanity itself, a story of survival, adaptation, and triumph against extraordinary odds.